And folks, why don't you go have a seat? And why don't my panelists come have a seat so you guys don't have to stand on the side there? And I'll introduce everybody in a minute. So it's really gratifying to see this big a turnout because you guys obviously care about the future of the Seattle art scene, and that's very reassuring to all of us up here on the stage. I have to say that I have a series of overlapping vested interests in the future of the gallery scene in particular. First, as an artist, I need places to show. Secondly, as an art critic for the Seattle Times, I need places to write about. And thirdly, as the co-founder and artistic director of the Gage Academy of Art, I need some place for our graduates to show their work. I need some place for them to aspire to, something for them to aspire to besides just painting in their studios for the amusement of themselves and their friends. I mean, artists need both a venue, they need an audience, and obviously they also need a marketplace. So that's why I care, but I'm sort of curious as to why all of you care. And I put this to my panelists when we were hanging out beforehand. They said, sure, ask them. So I'd like to know what all your interests are that brought you here tonight. So raise your hand if you're an artist and that's why you're here tonight. Wow. That could be a majority. Let's hear it for the artists. Okay, raise your hand if you're an art dealer or an aspiring art dealer, and that's why you're here tonight. Okay, a fair representation of them, and let's give them a hand too. Why the hell not? And raise your hand if you're here because you're just a patron of the arts, a lover of the arts, and you think the arts, that that art, and this has never been more important to say, that art outlives politics. And that's why you're here tonight, because you know how important it is. I mean, Seattle's obviously wealthy, but wealth with no art is like glitter with no soul, with nothing behind it. So, and in fact, let me just use that as my lead-in. The reason this panel exists is partly because it's just become increasingly obvious that there must be some sort of a disconnect because we're living in a boom town for many things, money, tech, restaurants, pizza places. But there seems to be a disconnect in that new apartment buildings, late model SUVs. But as all that has increased, along with property values, we haven't seen a corresponding increase in the number of venues to show and sell art. In fact, it sort of feels like there's a decrease, and we can all put up our own list of late regretted venues like Rock LaRue, Howard House, Platform, Francine Setters, Grover Thurston, Punch, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that's certainly got our attention. And then we just have seen so many paradigms be disrupted. I mean, just to put it in a sort of a silly, extreme way, is it a steady state for art galleries in Seattle, or are we looking at the Blockbuster video model on the really grim side, or on the positive side, the sort of independent bookstore model? Because there was a time not long ago when we saw independent bookstores as a threatened species, and yet, at least unless, I'm not getting it wrong, they seem to be holding their own, thank goodness, in spite of, the obvious problem. needs no mention, particularly here in Seattle, so many, only a few blocks from ground zero. But the point is, I mean, I don't know what to think about the gallery future. I mean, it does seem like the number of venues is shrinking, whereas the number of artists, the number of good art, the amount of good art being produced in this town certainly is not shrinking. It's anything that's increasing year in, year out. So that's why our panel is here. And let me tell you, we've got quite the brain trust. I'm really thrilled that all of them have agreed to be on the panel. And so let's introduce them, starting at the far end. Greg Kucera of Greg Kucera Gallery. If there was somebody who deserved to be the mayor of the Seattle art scene, it would be Greg Kucera. He's the real grown-up on the scene. And he's a super generous community member as far as his participation in the local art community. Sitting next to him is Marianne Peters, and Marianne Peters, a fabulous Seattle artist who she told me she's been working on the scene here for upwards of 40 years. So she has the big picture, long-term perspective, and a recent winner of the Stranger Genius Award. And by the way, I don't know if any of you were there at the ceremony. I was lucky enough to be there. And after she won her award, she announced that she was going to split it 3 ways with her and the other 2 nominees who she felt were equally deserving. How cool is that? Immediately to her right is Amanda Manitek, who is not only a fabulous artist, but is also the visual arts editor of City Arts Magazine. And she told us beforehand that, in fact, it's doing fine as an arts publication related to the art world in Seattle. So that's good to hear. And then finally is Marianne Ibrahim of the Marianne Ibrahim Gallery in Pioneer Square. Specializing in contemporary African art and photography, and opening a new show celebrating its 5th anniversary tomorrow, a show on backs. Art featuring, all sorts of art featuring backs. Probably the first time ever for that particular theme, but anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So okay, so let's open things to our panel, and I thought we would sort of divide this into 3 phases. The first phase is your analysis of what's happening now, your analysis of why, and your analysis of where we go from here. And we'll wrap it all up tonight in a nice, clean package, and you'll know everything there is to know by the end of the evening. Or maybe not. Okay, so I'll throw it open to anybody. Your analysis of the local scene. David Martin, a local dealer, said, there will be no commercial galleries in Seattle in 15 years. Comment on that, and plus all the related topics. Go ahead.
Are we on? Well, just, David closed his business. The rest of us are still working. So that's what I have to say to that. Businesses come and go, particularly art gallery businesses come and go, because it's a very unregulated business. Anyone can put their name on the door and call themselves an art dealer. So over the years, this has been a business that can and will attract all kinds of squirrely people. It also attracts a good number of people who actually care about what they're doing, who care about artists and all of that. And by and large, those people are the ones who stay in business, who don't go around cheating their artists, who don't behave badly. And by and large, they're the ones who stick it out, as many of us have done. I mean, Francine Cedars closed just shy of 50 years in the business. Woodside Braithwaite has been around for 50 years. Sam Davidson for 40-ish. And, you know, like you don't just get there easily. So, you know, I dispute the notion that the business is in trouble. I hate the title of this talk. I hated walking up to the door and seeing the words closing up shop and then sold out underneath it, like, ugh. So I'll let that ride.
Thank you. Are we just going down the line here? Is it?
Sure, why not?
Is this on for me as well? I want to toss it out in a little different perspective. First of all, a gallery, a dealer, a curator, a writer, a cultural activist have nothing to do unless there were artists making work. So given that there is no way to actually come up with a full definition of what's the best scenario for the arts in any one place, the problem that happens when you have what seems to be a diminishing of settings for artists and art supporters to have their work be seen is that you also diminish the diversity of options. And that's not good for culture. It should be a diversified scene. It should definitely be able to, in some way, illuminate what are the facets of the art world that are strong and the facets of the art world that are weak. And I don't think it's a bad thing that there's a shift in where these galleries are surfacing and where they're choosing to close or to bring themselves into the mainstream. I think what the real issue is how do we as ethical beings support culture in a place. I have gone in and out of the gallery world. I don't see it as a perfect model. And the reason I've chosen to do that has been varied. There's been times because I felt that I was losing my enthusiasm for other artists who were showing in the same place, and that by, I'd have to say, respect for them and for their dealer, that I needed to remove myself and make room for somebody else because I wasn't an additive figure, I didn't think, at that time in my life and in the gallery world. That turned out to be a good thing for me because it forced me to look at other ways to work. And it forced me to look at the menu of my own, I'd have to say, conceptual framework. The way that I'm working now is very, very different than the way that I was working when I first got out of graduate school at the end of the 70s. And I would like to say this isn't a despairing moment. I think that it makes room for models that are being generative from sectors of society that maybe didn't find themselves as cultural workers. So it makes very much sense to me to have a mathematician thinking about cultural issues and bumping shoulders with somebody who works with the built environment as an architect and wants to work with an artist who is using sound and, I don't know, electronics. So I would just have to say that when we watch the shift in our own city, I don't think it just is aligned with whether or not there's money. That money has to be in some ways informed. That money has to have advocates that are changing the vocabulary of what makes a viable and vibrant city for culture. And that's kind of the things that I'm looking at.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay. Oh God, this is such a huge, weird, unwieldy topic. But I want to start off by, I guess, like my gut reaction is like we kind of like isolate the idea of what an art gallery or art gallerist business is, and put it on a pedestal like, oh, this is what an art gallery is as a business. But or no, maybe that's the problem. We don't think of them as businesses, and we like to shit talk Amazon and all this stuff in Seattle. But I mean, the galleries that aren't continuing and aren't thriving and aren't succeeding are basically ones that aren't succeeding as businesses. And I think that that's like a part of the conversation that just like there's a lot of really smart dealers and gallerists out there. And their relationship to artists and to the artistic community is vital. Like you need those relationships. They actually do help sustain and build and nurture careers for artists throughout their lives and in like the microcosm of like the emerging artists in a city. But yeah, I mean, the galleries aren't closing up, they're never going away, but to think of them as some kind of like business that's impervious to like evolving, and so like the galleries that are kind of moving on are like going online and adapting and looking at new models. We talk about new models, but like that's just business, and that's what a gallery is, in part. Like it has like a spectrum of things as it functions and services people. But anyway, that's I'm just gonna get that off my chest. Like they're not closing up, obviously. And props to everyone who's fucking evolving, and I'm not gonna shit talk all of the new tech industries in Seattle because maybe we should be thinking more like them. I don't know.
Wait, could I just do a follow-up on that? What do you mean thinking more like the music industry?
No, like the tech music or tech industry.
Like the tech industry?
Yeah. Why not? I'm just saying, like, why shit all over them when they're clearly like doing a couple things right and like they're connecting with an audience and with consumers in a way that, I'm not saying that like every art gallery should be an Amazon, but let's not just shit all over them because they're doing something right. They're evolving and they're moving in stride with culture and with consumer habits. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm just putting that out there. No? Disagree?
Okay, good. Marianne?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a shop. I rejoined what Greg said about galleries being a place where ideas meet, where we pamper our artists, where we have to spend hours listening to all of their life, because it's relationship with humans. I don't sell commodities. I sell visions. And I remember one time one of my artists said to me, as I introduced myself, and she was next to me, and I said, I'm her art dealer. And she looked at me, what? I thought you were my gallerist. And she made a kind of a distinction between being a gallerist and an art dealer, because in the world of art, something that is very pure, putting a kind of a commercial concept to it, it's pretty degrading. But at the end, we are there for the artists, and we are there to make sure that they pay their rent, they pay for the production, they are continuing what they are doing, because if we give up on them, then they're not able to pursue that vision. And before they even get noticed by any curators or any press, there is a lot of work that the dealers are doing. And I salute all of the dealers that are in this room who are doing all of this work for the artists. But it's very important. There is a lot of investment that a dealer do when they put up on a show, saying, oh, is this gonna sell? Is it not gonna sell? It's just to honor the artist. So I feel that today I'm a little bit in and out of Seattle. I'm a kind of a time traveler here. I spend most of my time outside of Seattle. I'd say I counted last year, I think I was 4 months out of Seattle, just running around, doing art fairs, visiting different curators, because I work with international artists who are constantly demanding for a sort of a presence in other spaces. So I think artists have no boundaries, and I kind of retracted myself from the conversation here, because it seems to just go around. It seems like a group therapy. How are we gonna get out? How are we gonna so just go out? Just, you know, the farther that I get in Seattle, I think, is the Seattle airport. Beyond that, I don't know what's going on. But not that I'm not curious to find out more about it, but because I think that the artists should not have any boundaries. And tonight I have one of my artists who's sitting here in the front, is from Brazil. He lives in Sao Paulo, and he just came for 2 months here just to be closer to the gallery, work, and work on future projects. So I don't find any limitation. And I think now with what's going on with the political scene, and I'm not going to dig the knife into your chest, but I think the art dealers and the galleries would be much more powerful now than they were a few years ago. I mean, like, I just heard some crazy stories from in New York where a gallery rented the whole basement of the Whitney Museum just to project a video for his artist during the dinner. I mean, there's going to be more and more extravaganza, I think, with the dealers. And I think it's going to be probably in the next 5 years or 10 years, the golden areas for art dealers, because the institution will receive less and less funds because of all the tax, and there will be more power to the dealers to do what they want without any political agenda. So I have a lot of faith for the art dealers.
Yeah, in fact, there have been reports going around that the National Endowment for the Arts is currently, is currently in the is currently possibly on the chopping block, which would go along exactly with what you're saying. So what I'm hearing from my panelists is not necessarily this concept that the gallery scene in Seattle is in dire straits and we should be alarmed. I mean, Greg, you're basically saying it's just sort of galleries come and go, and it doesn't appear that different to you than it's appeared in the past.
Galleries do come and go. That's a given. But all kinds of businesses come and go. And if you think about what the gallery business is, it's a business whose entire history isn't a century old in the form of a white box gallery, which Marianne and I inhabit, where you have, a pristine space devoted only to showing art. The commercial aspect of it is minimized. It's not hospitable. It's not cozy. It's a serene, coldish space meant to highlight one thing, and that is whatever's in that room. And there's nothing else in that room but art. And so it's a business that in its entirety, if you think in the, say, New York in the 40s was the heyday of the beginning of what we think of as galleries. That's a very short history, and it's always been in process. Like the way galleries look has been in process. The way they behave is in process. The commission structure has been in process. All those kinds of things just keep evolving. And people go in and out of business for all kinds of reasons. We've seen some terrific dealers exit the business here, but they had reasons to do so. And some of those are fundamental. Can I make a living doing this? And one of the hardships for a gallery that's going to stay in business is, can you deal with your own esoteric taste and come up with something that's commercially viable? And Marianne, you probably see the same thing. Like, I feel like if I believe in that thing, I can find someone to believe in it with me, and I might be able to find several people to believe in it with me. That's how you create that kind of success. What we're seeing now is that as rents become more and more expensive and things like that, then you have all kinds of other people entering the business in different ways. And some of them are, galleries that are open, at low tide on a high, full moon kind of thing. And, that's, if we're living in a time of short attention span, I think that's hard to keep track of. It's hard for me to keep track of. I am there Tuesday through Saturday, 10:30 to 5:30. And people know that, and they can count on that. And that's true of most of the art dealers, who have spaces like my space. Like, we're very dependable about our business hours, and you're going to find the business open. So, just as art fairs dig into all of this, just as the internet affects all of this, it's just all a state of transition. And I think, Amanda, you spoke of that, like dealers who are finding a way to involve the internet and technology to keep their businesses alive. God bless them. Whatever it takes to keep artists showing. I just know one thing. Every artist I know still wants to have a one-person show that is up on view for more than 24 hours.
Go.
Yeah, and I interviewed a number of kind of like old, like long-term gallerists in Seattle, maybe about half a year ago, including Linda Hodges. I think I saw you back there. Hi. A couple different gallerists, and one of the things that stood out to me was just the emphatic belief that artists and art viewing patrons and everyone wants to, or most people invested in the arts, wants to see and have that experience in person, like see the art on a wall. Like there's like an implicit difference between seeing something digitally, like on the internet, and seeing it in person, which I just wanted to pipe up and say that. And being so immersed online constantly, like I didn't really, even though I myself am an artist as well, and I like to have my art on a wall, but like it kind of just struck me, like that was just a continual strain, a refrain. Like that needs to happen. People need to still see art on a wall. That there's something there that is.
Well,
Yeah.
but I still think that there are different models to be had for the gallery world. And there's some things that seem obvious to me, like most galleries are open when most people can't go there because they have jobs. It's like, what is wrong with that picture? That doesn't make any sense to me. And there's a lot of creative thinking that's going on around just civic design and the loss of it. And I mean, there are things we can see and actually could activate if we could figure out a way to do it. For example, at any given time, I don't know how many million square feet of real estate are empty in this town, but somebody in this audience knows that. And there's probably a way that the proprietors of those places could open them up in some ways that either there are pop-up exhibitions, or they give studio space to artists, or they find some way that there's a threading of cultural activity in their businesses because they have all this empty space. But as an audience member, as observers, we have to be demanding about what we want from our cultural milieu. We can't presume that Greg or Marianne or Amanda or people that's their business are going to be able to act in any way, initiate new models, because they're busy trying to maintain the ones that they have. But nevertheless, we should think about it. And there are artist-driven exhibition spaces in town. There are architect-driven exhibition spaces in town. There are other models. There are people doing things in their homes. There are, it's not, we aren't wedded to the white box model. And I think that that's more akin to the way that artists think, because I think that sometimes we think in a vast conceptual vision, and sometimes that can be something that is minimal in nature, or maybe it is something where you wish you could take over the basement of the Whitney, and Lord, how did you get to take over the basement of the Whitney? I'd like to take over the basement of the Seattle Art Museum. Okay. But I just think that it's very easy to get complacent about the design and the model that we take for granted and that we are comfortable with. And I think Seattle, like every city, is going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable about not only that there's loss and nostalgia about what might have been, but that uncomfortable that we're not having the nerve to do something in an almost brash way around our cultural understandings. And that's my little monologue about that.
I'm like Greg. I'm a purist. I think that the white box is very important to have a gallery. It's a presentation. I accept and actually enjoy to see different kind of spaces and alternative spaces. But from my own personal history, I'm coming from Paris, so try to get inside a gallery in Paris. Like the people would just look at you the way you dress, and if you don't fit, you can't pass the door. So when I came here, everything was open, everybody was happy. There was no caricature. Oh, are you an artist? Yeah, I'm an artist. Okay, everybody's an artist. So. And in my perspective, and it's not out of a criticism, it's like, I love to cook, but would that make me a chef? Would that make me open a restaurant? I'm not sure about that. But I love the energy. I really love the energy of, and all of this dynamism from the Seattle scene, and how younger artists will just connect and other. I just think that they might be suffocating here, as from what I see, that they need to get out more often. And regarding the Seattle scene, the art scene, I mean, I could have closed 5 years ago, to be honest with you. I kind of stay strong with you. You're a tough public. Because there's been so much nurturing with the local scene, very little with the international scene, let alone national scene. And what is really strange, and what I have found, I didn't know much about the collecting scene, the art collectors in Seattle. Actually, they were very much invisible to me until I saw them in New York, until I saw them in London, until I saw them in Miami. And I said, where were they? It's like I was in. And then suddenly some kind of a conversation started where the collectors in Seattle are world famous. Everybody, you go to Paris, you can go to Turin, they all know the collectors who live in Seattle, only we. I didn't know them, but the world knows them. So there is a very strong community of fine collectors in Seattle who have found sort of who have an eclectic taste, who have found some dealers to connect with outside. But I will be honest with you, I would say like 90% of my business is outside of Seattle. So I constantly travel, I deal with new technology. I'm on a platform called Artsy, which generates a lot of revenue. I think I should quote them, they should give me a discount for that. But I reach out to institutions, so I also work a lot with institutions, and I will agree and disagree with you because you can look at a piece of work and start having a conversation, and the act of seeing it may come much later. As I don't think people want to see the piece like, I need to see it physically. It's like, you might, if you're far away, you might want to have another way of accessing the artwork, and then if you're close, you get to visit the place. I have a lot of interests of people who wish to see my show, but they live far away. And there are people who are here who haven't seen any of the show, but it's I had some shows that I don't sort of it doesn't work in Seattle and it works in London. So there's all of these kind of differences, and there are things that work well in Seattle and don't work any other place. So everything is biased on my end because I only have a small, I haven't been here long enough to be able to make a judgment.
And I think we have to thank our lucky stars for the internet. If you think about the way art business used to happen long distance, somebody sent you little 2x2-inch slides that you held up to a light or the sun and tried to look at some godforsaken painting on there. Now, you have a computer screen the size of your television, and you have digital imagery that is astonishingly good, and we all get to take advantage of that. And so that ability is something that really works in our favor. Yes, people still like to touch, feel, smell that art when they can, but we sell a lot of art to people who aren't going to lay eyes on it till it arrives at their home and they unwrap it. But what's true about that is that people don't buy a pig in a poke. You know, they're not completely out of the loop there. You know, they know something about that artist. They've seen something by that artist, and if you send them a series of images, they'll rely on the knowledge that they already have about what that artist's works look like, and they'll make an informed decision. I think now a much more informed decision than you could have ever made looking at a slide. Or, you know, how did we do this before slides? You had, you know, artists making reproductions of other artists' work and sending that. It's, you know, we're not in those days anymore. Let's celebrate the fact that we can do business that way. And, you know, we're selling art all over the world. You know, I want every continent. I think Antarctica will be a hard one, but I think we'll get all the others. And, you know, that's just the nature of being present and visible on the web all the time. And people can shop in their underwear at 3:30 in the morning if they want to. They don't have to find me open.
Wow. In your underwear at 3:30 in the morning buying art.
You
I love
know
that
it
thought.
happens. It's those same people that are typing blog reports, you know.
I think everything that's been said is true. You know, I wouldn't argue any of the points that have been made, but there are aspects, as our society is grappling with various topics at any given time, the art world isn't exempt from that. And I think that that's the challenge for the future of arts in this city in particular. When I first started as an artist, everything was consolidated. So Pioneer Square, I mean, that nostalgia we all talk about Pioneer Square was because it was an incredible luxury. And as a young artist, you could go from gallery to gallery to gallery. And over time, I made friends with all the gallery dealers. And you know, if they didn't show my work was not the issue. It was whether or not that we could have some sort of a conversation that would inform my abilities as an artist, and I cherished that. But I'm also very aware that there were a lot of people that were left out of that experience. And I think that we know that by various movements that have surfaced because of our political climate. I think we're well aware that we need to be inclusive in who gets brought into the gallery world and what their topics are. And we have to educate our audiences to be able to accommodate topics that maybe they don't want to deal with. And also look at the different kinds of aesthetic frameworks that there are. I mean, I was trained in a classical way. I have a master's in fine art. You know, I went into a painting program. I have peers that did not do that, nor would that have been an option for them. And so I'm very aware as an artist that if I feel like it is my responsibility because I've had this much entree into the gallery world in Seattle to be able to say, I'm making this work, but you really need to know about that artist's work because they're not going to walk in here and talk to you about it. And that's a little bit more of the communal responsibility of culture in general. And the gallery world is one facet, but that piece is a really big piece to what happens to the future of where our galleries and where our cultural institutions take themselves from here.
Hi, everyone. I'm trying to wrap my head around where to start again. Well, I want to say that I think that I'm part of kind of like my generation. I did not go to art school, and I kind of like pulled myself up by the do-it-yourself bootstraps, which, like I see Sharon in the front row here, Sharon Arnold of Bridge Productions and many other things. Like when I kind of got started in town, like I was part of like you're an artist, but you're also running like do-it-yourself spaces, independent spaces. You're kind of like throwing crazy parties and doing like a little bit more of that, whatever, like avant-garde type of shit. But like, I think that there's maybe like coming from that background, there's a little bit of a false binary, I think, as far as like the white cube versus the do-it-yourself spaces, which in your description of this thing, you were kind of suggesting that was threatening to take over like the more like proper white cube dealer model. And I think that is, at least in Seattle, like there's so many things that feed into this. Like yes, like Seattle is kind of insular and it's a bubble, and maybe like a lot of the people that are buying art in these more do-it-yourself independent run spaces are not the ones who are buying like a $20,000 painting or photograph or something, or maybe that's way on the high end, maybe a $5,000 photograph or something. Even then, like we have a lot of spaces in Seattle, at least, that I've been a part of and that I see constantly, that are the nurturing artists who, they're emerging artists who are going to end up in your gallery, you know, maybe one day, selling at that price point. But like, I am such a fan of that, and I don't, like, I've had a lot of fights and conversations with like editors of magazines and throughout the art world strata of like trying to pick apart like which are the galleries that you review, or which are the shows, or which are the artists. And to me, it's like such more of a holistic environment that like one thing feeds the other and contributes to the other, and it's this ecosystem I think is so important. And so like, and like there's Greg Lundgren, I'm just gonna start name calling everybody. The kind of works that people are doing who are not White Cube in Seattle have been phenomenal, and just for me personally, that is super important. And so I think in this kind of conversation, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. I just wanted to like bring that up as something that I think is really dynamic, and that Seattle has got like some really good foundation, and it does feed into that like more proper White Cube gallery environment. I don't know.
Amanda, do you think that those spaces that, you know, I don't believe that the White Cube is the only way to do it, but do you think that those spaces can represent artists? Can they help an artist make a living? You know, will those very sort of ephemeral spaces become more brick and mortar over time? Is it like a food truck that becomes a restaurant?
In some cases, yes. In some
Yeah,
cases, no.
great analogy, by the way, Greg. Great
But
analogy.
as someone who has experience with White Cube galleries and knows a ton of artists who are like totally mature artists, like also aren't totally sustained on that and can't be in Seattle.
But it's a good launching pad.
No, I mean like with a gallery of your caliber even. Like it's hard to pay the rent, even if you have like cream of the crop gallery. I'm just, right?
Well, that's because we do such a crappy job.
What?
That's because we sometimes do a crappy job of it.
No, I mean it's just it's just a fact. It's an
If
economic
I
fact.
may, I think you're very romantic. I like you very much for that. But I accept the ideas of having alternative spaces. It's really nice. But this is not the way where you are going to, represent an artist. It's a shot. It's a hit. Done. The person's going to come back to reality. Where is it? Where are they going to go? Are you going to be able to reach out, take the plane, go to a curator, explain the work of the artist? Like all of that is interesting and it's needed. It's very important and vital, but it's not the essence of how you represent an artist. When you represent an artist, you're just standing by, you're correcting the biography, you're going out there to reach out for curators. You're just there. You produce work that you're not sure to sell, just to expose them. And on the top of that, you have to pay your rent. And on top of that, you have to, continue. And I refuse for people to think that, oh, I'm going to open a pop-up, place and I'm going to represent, because it's foolish. A representation is a long-term vision for an artist. And it's a long vision that when I work with my artists, I said, each new artist, I said, I need 2 years minimum. 2 years minimum is nothing for me. It takes 5 to 10 years to build an artist. And I think it's important to have those alternative spaces, and they will never substitute a white, cube gallery ever. But they become, you become a sort of a place where galleries will go and pick on those alternative spaces.
It's a
for me-
necessary,
Yes,
like
it's a
stepping
necessary,
stone.
yes.
Yeah,
For me, the
part of
best
ecosystem.
introduction that I can have of an artist is when an artist introduced me to another artist. And in order to have, it's the artist-run spaces that can allow me to do my shopping, sort of, But I think in this, we talk about the art world. It's like, in the art world, Seattle. It's like Seattle is not the art world. It's just a place, as New York, as other places, but it doesn't have the same competition. And I think I kind of have ambition for Seattle. Basically, I thought I was going to be cool coming from Paris to Seattle. I realized I'm actually cooler when I leave Seattle and I represent Seattle. Because people say, "Oh, you're from Seattle?" Really? And I say, yeah, I'm from Seattle. Because that's what I am now. I'm a gallery from Seattle, wherever places that I go. And I think, and I know there are other places, galleries, architects that are ambassadors of Seattle. And I think that's what we have to promote much more than trying to be insular, because the city has such a great reputation worldwide. Like everybody come to me and they say, "Wow, Jimi Hendrix, yeah, and Bill Gates." Certainly. So I'm up for that kind of energy to get out. It's a very pleasant place. It's not a bad. Only us, maybe we complain, but there's not a bad idea of Seattle outside of Seattle. And I think we have to cultivate that.
Marianne, do you think that having a space gives you a certain amount of credibility?
I need to have a space.
Yeah. So
Sometimes I'm like, why am I having a space? I need to move the space somewhere else. If I don't have a space, I don't go to any art fairs, period.
And for instance, it used to be for a long time that you couldn't get into an art fair if you didn't also have a bricks and mortar space of some kind, so that there was, a built-in credibility that came with that. And it'll be interesting to see, as now we have alternative art fairs, will they allow alternative art galleries to participate in them to the same degree that
I'm always very skeptical about. I think it's unfair for art fairs to accept dealers who don't have a space. To me, it's totally unfair because I could literally sit in my bed and just deal with artists, and sell from my bed without having any cost, without having to ship anything, without having. So it's my personal opinion, and I have said that to many other art fair manager. I'm not okay with art dealers showing at a space where they don't have showing at a fair without having a space.
Like you're the only Seattle gallery. Like last year I was at the Armory. I think you were the only Seattle gallery.
And this
there.
year too.
Yeah, like that's saying something. Like that.
But we
is-
can.
Do you have to come from outside of Seattle to want to take Seattle out of Seattle?
No. I applied. Greg hasn't applied. Jim Harris hasn't applied. I get lucky. So I think if there are more participation, or if they, maybe we can go to those places. But today, Greg, you do art fairs, right?
63 and 34 years.
So I think you can't survive in this. You can't really. You can survive, but you can't prosper if you don't do art fairs. That's a reality, unfortunately. Sorry, Sharon.
So I just want to interject one thing. And by the way, I hope people caught Marianne's comment earlier on about how she does not consider her business a shop. And, there's a continuum with art galleries, obviously. There's dealers who have a very idealistic, I might even say romantic conception of what they do, even though obviously they still see it as a business, and they really see their job as communication and nurturing and educating. And I think, you know, Greg and Marianne are obviously ideal examples of that sort of art gallery. And that sort of art gallery is absolutely not a shop. I 100% agree. But I just have two things to throw out. One is, I do think that we're going to be unable to answer the question, which for me is sort of is one of the burning issues, is that I think we're getting a consensus that the white cube galleries are an important part of the ecosystem. That we have, you know, we have all these different components of the ecosystem of where you have the emerging artists and the emerging art galleries, but that ultimately, for the job that people like Greg and Marianne do, that's pretty essential. But that is one of our issues to me, is that there have been no new white cube galleries that have opened in Seattle in recent years. And perhaps it's because of the bar for opening galleries like that is getting higher and higher in terms of real estate prices, in terms of uncertainty about the future because of things like the internet. But I want to throw out a question. I mean, if anybody has any comments on that, that's fine too. But I have a question, since we're talking about art fairs, which is our local version, which is going to be year 3, is coming soon, I guess August of this year. And Greg actually has been involved on the committee.
Marianne, too.
Marianne, you both have, yeah, and thanks for that. So I'd like to hear from all my panelists how if you think that the art fair is a net positive for the art scene in general in Seattle, if it's neutral, if it's a negative, or what? Because it's obviously a phenomenon. Hopefully it will continue after this year. It'll be a regular part of the scene. So
I don't think it can be anything but positive. I mean, you have dealers coming here from all over the country and elsewhere in the world, and they're bringing things all of you have not been able to see, and things that we have not been able to show you in our spaces. So if this is about educating a public and educating its artists and educating its educators about what there is out there, how could it be bad? It costs you a few bucks to go in. You don't have to buy anything. You can leave that to your neighbor to do for you, which many people do. And you get the pleasure of seeing this banquet, just smorgasbord of art from all over the place that you couldn't see any other way in a weekend in Seattle. How can that be negative?
I hate art fairs.
Well, you can hate art fairs. I hate art
love
fairs
it.
too, believe me.
we got some diversity of opinion here.
I mean, I think everything that Greg is saying is true, but it's such a glut of imagery that it's really hard to find in the stew those little kernels of memorable, sparking kinds of art experiences. And I think also because it goes back to what Marianne said originally, that, you know, she is there to nurture her artists, that it's about this holistic human experience being an artist as well as the product. And it so commodifies what it's like to be an artist that it doesn't leave room for a more fluid conversation about that. And I think that it does put a huge expense on the galleries. And in my perfect world, I would want my dealer, who actually I'm lucky with my dealer, but I want him to spend that money for that weekend that he has to spend on an art fair, which can be what, $25,000?
Easily.
Easy, just to put your chair down. That's a lot of money that could be used on an artist. I mean, I'd rather put him on an airplane and say, take a portfolio of my work and, bother every cool dealer in major cities.
But that can't be done as efficiently as at an art fair. I mean, if any part of me hates an art fair, it's my feet. Standing on a concrete floor for a week, that is a pain in the feet. And you know, like I go to work on a fur floor. That is a blessing. And every time I go to big cities where art galleries are now, you know, roller rinks that are concrete floors, oh my God, I would hate to do that. And yet, you know, you can't get all those curators and critics and stuff to see that work in a more efficient way.
But I don't know that it's in a memorable way, and I don't know that it sticks. I mean, I have, you know, like
Well, it
many
all
of
doesn't stick for sure.
The
But
good stuff sticks.
Well, sometimes the good stuff sticks.
But you know, Marianne, the reason why a dealer do an art fair, as much as you would like to send the dealer for vacation,
No, I don't want
it's
him to go
because
on
we need the
vacation.
money and because we have to work and it's a lottery. So basically, you're going to invest 20, maybe to get 200. You don't know. So the reason why art dealers are doing art fairs is that is in a short period of time the moment where you can maximize your revenue and you can expose your artists. So you haven't sold anything, it's going to be on long term. I have sometimes after I've done an art fair, 6 to 8 months running of business. Oh, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm thinking, oh, the piece is not available. Why don't you go for this one and so on? So the reason why we do the art fairs, and as much as our artists, and I wish my artists were as considerate like you, and they said you need vacation, rather than have you sold anything?
I don't think
said.
you
That's
heard
not
me,
what you.
Marianne.
Wait,
I
I
don't
think
wanna send
she's
her
been.
on
You've been
vacation.
misquoted. She's been misquoted.
Yeah,
She
so
wasn't
that's the
talking
reason
about
why we're
vacation.
like, okay, we have to do this fair. Basically, there's probably 2 fairs who makes my year. It's sad, but there are 2 fairs who make my year. And then all along, I won't tell any numbers, okay? But I have to keep going and nurturing all of these relationships. So we don't do art fairs because, you know, we like to stand or we wish to be somewhere else. So it's because we have to. It's a reality.
I understand that. I think, you know, I confess that what I love about art fairs is the counter activities of art fairs, the alternative exhibitions that go up, the alternative conversations that get hatched, you know, the gathering of people in places that they wouldn't be otherwise. And so that consolidating of energy, I appreciate that. But I just, personally, I find art fairs, I'm an old hippie. I love the heart of the arts. I love the kind of the energy of an idea. I love the conversation that my peers set up that I get to be jealous about because I didn't make that.
So, guys, I said in my last email that you'd be shocked at how quickly this hour goes. When you're having fun, it really does. And we promised that we'd leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So, much as I'd like to continue this thread, I'd also love to open up. There's so many committed, passionate, and involved people in the audience tonight. I'd love to open up the floor. So, what's our marching orders for how does the Q&A work?
We have about 20 minutes, and if you could use either of these 2 mics, that would be great. And keep them brief and in the form of a question, please. Thank you.
Brief and in the form of a question. Go.
Go. I'm wondering if the problem goes deeper. During Christmas, I, of course, gave a lot of my art away, and I framed it up. I went to 3 different framers. I wanted to get a good price. And in conversation with them, I was kind of appalled. What they were saying is the Wenatchee mill where they get their rag paper is closed. They said that the tech industry is not, the people who are Amazon people are not interested in double mats and glass and the perfect frame. They'll go to Target or Fred Meyer and they'll get a black frame to go on it and they're happy with it.
Question, please. Question.
Is this a deeper problem that we need to look at? The problem? Is it more than just galleries? Is the roots of no interest in art? Is it, because if framers are having problems, There's a deeper problem.
Well, I don't think you're hearing any of us say that there's no interest in art. I think the art world has never been bigger than it is today. It's more available to a broader range of people than it has ever been. And you know, the truth is, you're no longer defined by your zip code. You know, if I was dependent on my 981 zip codes for a living, I would starve to death. But I'm not. I've got the internet working for me. I'm doing these art fairs. That alone has broadened the zip code affiliations for my gallery tremendously, and I'm sure Marianne feels the same thing. You know, we're all responding to.
I agree with her. We don't have enough framers in Seattle.
But
I have two framers, one here and one in New York. No, we don't have enough.
But if you're getting
That'll
at
be
the
our next
idea-
conversation.
The framers are saying that their competitors are going out of business, so something's going on.
That's a different issue.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering, as gallerists, if the three scariest words in the world are tiny house movement. And as wealthier people move into ever smaller homes, are you talking to your artists about creating smaller works? And are you seeing that manifest itself in your business?
Oh, wow. Thanks for that.
Well, absolutely not. We are not. I am not talking to my artists about making smaller, less ambitious works of art. If you're not going to be ambitious, I don't want to work with you.
I have
Equating skill with ambition, though. You're conflating skill and ambition.
No, not necessarily. I mean, tiny works of art. Go to IKEA, buy your art there. You know, like I think that there is a group of people for whom that is going to work just fine. But if you want to experience art in a capital A way, then that's what all of us are doing.
But that doesn't mean a small work can't be brilliant.
No, it doesn't. Of course not. But would you respond to Jim if he said, Marianne, I'd like you only to make small works now?
He wouldn't do that.
I know he wouldn't. But you wouldn't respond well if he did.
I wouldn't respond to any dealer that asks.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
All right, y'all. Thank you for this conversation. And I have lots of things that I've been thinking about, but the conversation between alternative and white cube spaces.
Wait, can you share what you do?
Yeah,
real
I'm
quick?
just doing this for both of those things because I think that poses a lot of questions. Because I think that if we're talking about building a rich culture in Seattle, we all need each other, and artists need different modes of spaces to show their work. And I feel like that there's been a shift in the last couple years in smaller galleries really pulling their weight and bringing a lot of artists opportunities in Seattle to show their work that they don't have otherwise, and that are bringing people from outside the community in to show their work as well. So my question is, I guess in this sort of shifting landscape in results to the internet and this big change in content that we're seeing in art and across mediums, do you feel that the White Box Gallery is sustainable in the long term in Seattle? Because a lot of you are talking too about going outside and seeking communities outside of Seattle. So do we have the infrastructure to support the White Cube Gallery in Seattle, or are those alternative spaces going to create more room for a new model and a new way of talking about work and art experience?
Well put, yeah. So if everybody could give a quick response to that question, that would be great.
Yes.
Wait, yes?
if it's not sustainable, I move. Simple.
Okay.
I think we're probably going to have to start thinking about what we think the parameters of Seattle are. I think the geography is going to shift, and I think that's something that we have to put into the kind of the list of changes that are going to happen here. So it's not going to all be downtown. You know?
Yeah, I think I already kind of spoke to this. I don't know.
Yeah.
The question was, is White Cube sustainable when we're talking about needing to go out?
Is the model, is the infrastructure that we have in place right
Yeah.
now sustainable?
like on the scale
Like,
of
can
what
we
you're
keep doing
and,
what we're
like,
sure,
Yeah.
or can we just keep doing what we're doing the way that we're doing it, or do we need to change that like elitism, or change the kind of structure that's there, or do artists need to be represented? Do like all these questions,
Well, I do think that like the relationship between, and we haven't really discussed this on stage, but back in the green room we were talking about like the actual role of the dealer is much more than just like selling works, even though that is very important. Like it helps, or the whole like the function of the dealer or the gallerist is to create and nurture careers, and there's much more that goes into like the dealer and the artist than ever meets the eye of the collector or the person wandering into a white cube gallery space or whatever. That being said, like in my experience too, like interviewing people who have had galleries for a long time, usually they own their spaces, like their actual brick and mortar spaces, or they have like an alternate source of income. That is not uncommon, I think, for like the long termers. So I don't know. I would say that like go snatch up some property down in Tacoma right now. If you want to be like a brick and mortar gallerist in 20 years who's like, I don't know, that's just like one of my theories. But I mean, I don't know, it's gonna evolve, and like, of course it's sustainable, but how it's going to be sustainable, like gallerists are gonna have to be flexible and adapt and figure out all kinds of new ways to sell stuff.
Just to get back on you said, you used the word elitist, or elitism.
yes,
just like,
yes, I did. Yes.
I'm not comfortable with that word, because when I go to galleries, I mean, my door is always closed, open, not closed. Sometimes closed when I'm away. No, but the door is open. You don't see any dots, any label on the walls. I'm engaging with conversation. When I go to galleries all around the world, I feel privileged. I don't feel elitist, and I don't think the other space feel like they kind of are promoting some sort of elitism. But it's very important if we want an artist to be successful, because there's a path and there's a career. He cannot continue to show at some coffee shop and other places. If you want his voice to be heard, he has to, at some point, it starts with an alternative place. It's like all the artists, I wish I had known Kehinde Wiley when it was like 15 years ago. I would have purchased his piece because he was doing alternative spaces. So there's a progression, I think.
Is that Nagara over there? So Nagara, why don't you take the next question?
And let me just say in regard to that, elitist does not equate to you can come in my door for free. And that is true of all of our spaces. It doesn't cost you a dime to come through there. So how elitist can we be if that is true?
Yes, but you're also previously being dismissive of alternative spaces in this talk as well, which I'm running a space like on my own back, so I feel I struggle with that, because I'm not necessarily a white cube gallery, but I think that we need to support each other. Like the alternative spaces need to be supported and heard by the white box galleries as well. So like I don't like being brushed aside, like my content doesn't matter when I'm showing some of the most progressive work in Seattle. So that's what I mean by that. I don't mean to jump in, but
I don't know you, but please send me an email.
I will.
Okay, Nagara.
I got you.
So, ça va, Marianne, tu l'as tué, la situation. Okay, so moving forward, briefly, the implicit understanding underneath this conversation is that we're only having this conversation because there are artists that make work who presumably want to have a career, who want to make money. Marianne said earlier that she does not sell commodities, she sells a vision. So my question to all four of you is, what is your vision for artists who want to make money as the situation stands right now?
And by the way, I just want to say that Nagara is going to host one of these art talks in April. She's going to interview an artist right here on this stage, so check that out in the town hall schedule. So go ahead. Anybody want to start with Nagara's question?
Well, every artist has visions of having money to continue making their work. I mean, I think that it's part and parcel to being an artist, but if I had a vision for it, I would hope that somehow, in a civic way, we could jumpstart conversations in a consistent way about the importance of culture and the importance of the arts. And part of you have your doors open for free, but people are afraid to go in the door because they don't understand that it's an accessible place. And I think, Gary mentioned briefly about the NEA. You guys, that's no small shakes, because that's a symbolic gesture. If the NEA gets shut down, that's a symbolic gesture that will overflow into other kinds of things that you take for granted in the cultural life that you experience. So we just have to be really noisy about that. And I think that and I think that there is there's a lot of ways to help have a client understand how to buy work from somebody. I mean, I think that all of you come up with some sort of a system where you give your clients they get a break, or which I hate dealers' discounts, but we can talk about that in a whole other forum. But I think it's important to gesture to the clients and be able to say there are many ways to buy this work. If you have to buy it over a certain amount of time, let's discuss how you do that. So I think, in regard to answer your question, I think that there has to be as much flexibility in the way that work is sold and in the way that it's presented, so that there's some sort of a meeting of the minds about the value of it. And money, the price tag does get equated to the art. That's a hard part for what was just being spoken about. I mean, having worked this long, I'm not going to sell work for $250. I'd rather give it away, which is what I do. I give it away. So that's a whole nother conversation about how do we elevate the business of being an artist into every other kind of career that is compensated in a viable way. And so there isn't, my vision, perfect world. I'm chasing a perfect world that gives equity to the supporters of the arts and the makers of the arts.
Mic drop. Oh shit. I mean, there's so much. As someone who is a producer and creator, and as someone who tries to write about artists and support them that way, and then facilitate artists through art spaces, I don't know. There's definitely, like you said, there's so much to be done on like just this basic level of visual art, at least, let alone performance art and all these other kinds of arts, like being valued just by like culture in general. There's a lot of work to be done, and I feel like I'm always chipping away at some little small part of that. But for me, I will speak to myself as a creator and as an artist right now. Like I do depend on, or I highly value, and I have been, I don't depend on them, but it is like a massive, massive boon to my life and my career to have a trusted gallerist and gallery and dealers on your side. Like you can't, like, I don't know, I couldn't, like it's a massive, massive part of my life, and I need them. So I'll just put that out there.
I won't tell you all of my secrets, and I'm sure Greg is also very secretive now. But patience, I think it's patience. It's a long-term vision. I remember one of my artists, I told her like, hey, you know what, this museum wants to buy your work. I was like, yeah, in 2 years, forget about it. I'm like, what, it's 2 years? No, for them it took long. For me, it was just a short time. And so the vision of the artist, as much as it's inscribed in the long term, it's also dealing with realities. And the realities is like, okay, month to month. So when the artist said, okay, there's something that is coming up, we have to keep that alive. We have to keep that vision alive, because they are, artists are very sensitive and emotional, uncontrollable sometimes. I'm very, very lucky because all of my artists were kind of the same range of age. So we kind of speak the same language. And so yeah, so it takes even for myself to learn about this endurance and patience, and you don't become a dealer in 2 years or 5 years. Greg has been doing this for such a long time. So it's a lot of patience, I would say, in order to monetize or to get even results.
If nothing else happens out of tonight, I would love if we've inspired somebody in the audience to become the next Greg Kucera or Marianne Ibrahim. We could use them. Oh, you're the next Greg Kucera. You're the next Greg Kucera.
You really want to lose all your hair?
Okay, and folks, I know we've got several people waiting to ask their questions, but I'm getting the high sign from the management that we've worn out our welcome, that our time is up. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much to all my panelists. Let's hear it for them. And thanks for your attention and interest. And let's keep supporting that local art scene, particularly in these troubled times.